Hey, welcome everyone to the ACCE 2022 Hawaii Catholic Schools Annual Conference virtually. I am Celeste Q and I am your moderator for session number 403, the Financial Scorecards, the critical components of the school's financial health with Deacon Raffy Mendoza. Deacon Raffy Mendoza is with the Hawaii Catholic Schools as the school accounting manager for St. Teresa School in Honolulu, St. Joseph Parish School in Waipahu, and also St. Michael's School in Wailua, and St. Joseph's School in Hilo. He relocated from Manila, Philippines to Maui in 2007 to manage an international Christian training center. Before relocating to Hawaii, he occupied management positions in major multinational companies for over 25 years. He is an ordained permanent deacon of the Diocese of Honolulu. He is assigned at this time to Mary Star of the Sea Church in Honolulu. This section will be for about an hour. You can answer your questions via the chat option if that is available, and it is available during this session. Questions will be answered throughout the presentation and also at the end if time permits. Let us pray. Let us take a moment to put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. God of love and of life, thank you for the abundant blessings you have bestowed on us all. Help us to look deep within ourselves and discover the gifts you have blessed us with, and to receive your gifts with great joy. We thank you for the gifts of our presenter today. May you guide and inspire him to share his knowledge with us as we open our eyes, ears, and hearts to what we are about to learn, and may it help us become better educators for our students each day. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Now let us warmly welcome Deacon Raffy Mendoza.
Hello, everybody. Allow me just a minute to do a screen share. Aloha, everybody. My goal is hopefully in the next 50 minutes, I'm able to provide you the perspective that would allow you to become better administrators, especially within the context of the finances of the school. I begin my presentation with these two important quotations that probably we all have heard. There are only two lasting things we can hope to give our children and our students. One is roots, the other is wings, right? And I firmly believe, together with you, that we have an important role with the Hawaii Catholic Schools in setting that firm foundation, that roots that will sustain our students when they go to their young adult and their teenage and their professional lives. And so it's very important for me that we take time out in terms of just appreciating this particular calling in our lives at this particular point of time. My presentation with you is understanding the scorecards. It's allowing you to understand hopefully in basic terminologies that will allow you to participate actively in terms of the health of the school. While the school is a ministry, the ministry of the church of forming, educating our children, let us not forget that also we have a responsibility regarding the financial stability of the school, because we have families, we have our staff, we have an obligation to make sure that they are compensated well. We have an obligation to pay the electricity bills. And so my approach is for you to understand the whole financial jargon within the context of any sports, right? For you to participate in any sports, it's very important for you to understand the rules of the game. For you to be able to actively participate, those rules are very important. It sets the parameters by which you will make a decision, by which you will call a timeout, and of course, for you to understand how much more time you have before the end of the game. And so it is in this same context that I want you to understand when we look at the financial health of the school, there are rules of the game. And these rules also applies to our own personal wallet, right? The first rule, he is rich whose income is more than his expenses, and he is poor whose expenses exceed his income. That is pretty straightforward, right? Even in our own personal wallets, right? If our expenses exceeds our pay and what we will receive, then we are in serious problem and we'll be scratching our head how to make both ends meet. And so the rule in any business, even our personal finance, even in household finances, it really is how do we ensure that our income is higher than our expenses? Because it's only then that we have a savings. When expenses is higher than income, and that's where we start scratching and being what we call, then end up filing bankruptcy in that sense. So that's a basic rule. Income should be higher than expenses. There's this wonderful quotation by Khalil Gibran. Money is like a stringed instrument. He who does not know how to use it properly will hear only discordant music. I love this quotation, right? Because it is able to portray to us the importance of managing cash or money properly. Otherwise, it's just like an instrument that's out of tune. And so this is the second rule, which means cash will come in, cash will go out, money in, money out. But the goal that we have should be the inflow, money in, should be greater than the outflow. Then that's the time we could start generating the savings that we would need for the future use, maybe for the plans that we have in our families. So those are just the two basic rules of running an enterprise or even our homes. Income should be higher than expenses. Cash inflow higher than cash outflow. And they go hand in hand. And so these are the four terminologies that you should be familiar with. This is the umbrella terminology: income, expenses, cash in, cash out. So far, you're good? You're okay? You're following the rules of the game? Basic income in whatever categories, there's the umbrella terminology, all the income, then expenses, and then cash in, cash out. When we combine all those four important elements, this is where you will have the scoreboard. Right? In any sports, you have the scoreboard. It tells you at a moment in time what the score is and how many fouls and has been committed and how many timeouts that you can still call, right? So it is in the same principle when you talk about the finances. Financial statements really are the scoreboard. So you are making a decision that will impact the income, the expense, the cash in, the cash out, those four elements. And your decisions are now recorded in terms of a scoreboard or a scorecard. So always keep in mind, the reports being generated by your business managers are the results of the decisions that you all have made. And the critical element, it's a scoreboard at a given point of time. Eventually, the time will run out, game is over, or for us in the school, the financial, the fiscal year is over, right? But we're able to monitor every month, every quarter, but eventually there's a ending time, which is the end of the fiscal year. We run from July to June the 30th. So let's start up with some basic understanding. So the school on February 1st decided to buy 2 smart television sets for $1,000, and they're using the diocese issued credit card. All right, so because of the requirements that you have, okay, let's buy 2 television sets. So the question would be, is there an expense and is there a cash outflow? Would you be able just to put in the chat what your response will be? I'm not able to see. Hopefully Celeste can read the chat responses. Is there an expense for purchasing the TV and is there a cash outflow? Again, the school bought the TV for $1,000. They used a credit card on February 1st. Celeste, were there responses to any response on the chat?
Everyone's being a little shy.
Okay. Okay. So because I bought the TV, do I have an expense? Yes. Right? But then on February 1st, is there a cash outflow? And really, no effect on February 1st. Once the credit card is due, which is for purposes, for example, the March 15th, the due dates, then what happens? In terms of expense, there's no effect. But now there's an outflow because now I have to pay for this credit card purchase. Is it clear so far? If I'm running too fast, if I'm traveling, my speech is about 100 miles, please let me know so that I can slow down. But I want to cover as much. So, okay.
So we
No
have
question.
people that are agreeing. They're saying
Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay. So a decision was made by these television sets using a credit card. So you now have this scorecard or a scoreboard, and they're called the first statement of activities, which really summarizes your income and expenses. And the second scoreboard or a scorecard, statement of financial position, if it's a combination of the cash and the receivables, all the different elements. So again, these are the 2 basic scoreboards that you must always see because the interplay of income, expense, cash in, cash out are reported in these 2 financial statements. We're calling it statement of activities because we are a nonprofit. Normally in a for-profit business, they call it income statements. And then for us, instead of balance sheet for profit organizations, our terminology is a statement of financial position. So what happens on February when a report is generated, a scorecard, a scoreboard is generated, then it would reflect an expense, but there's no cash. There's no cash outlay. So what would reflect is there's still an obligation by the school to pay for this purchase. When a scoreboard is presented in March 15, there's no impact for the expenses. It already has been recognized in February. The change will happen in your financial position because as you pay your obligation, it reduces your liability, your payable, but then it also reduces your cash. Okay, hopefully that's clear enough. If at any time you need questions, clarifications, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, let's have a second example. June 1st, the school did a cleanup and they sold some of those classroom desks for $1,500. And then the buyer promised, okay, I'll purchase all of this for $1,500, but I'll pay you next month, July 10. So the school sold some of their desks for $1,500, but the payment will be July 10th. So again, this time around, the question will be, is there an income and is there a cash inflow as of June 1st? So on June 1st, by selling the desks, do you have an income? Yes. Did you receive cash? Not yet. right? July 10, when the check cleared, then what happens? Then there's no impact in terms of income expenses. The income will be now in your cash in, money in, because now you're able to deposit the check. So again, when a scorecard, the scoreboard is generated and reported to you for the statement of activities, which is the interplay of income and expenses, you will see an income for selling the old desks for 1,500, but you will not have the cash, but you will recognize that as a receivable that you will collect from the buyer. Come July 10th, another scoreboard will be generated, and there's no impact with income expenses. It has to do with your financial position because now the receivable is reduced, but you now have cash. So really, what I want you to picture, the interplay of these four elements. You have income. Any income is money coming in. Expenses, money going out, right? That is pretty much the general perspective. But for you to be able to manage the financial health of the school, do not visualize these waterfalls because all of the water that comes in eventually goes out. That is a wrong way of understanding. I want you to visualize a dam. A proper financial management should be within the context of a dam, where you try to accumulate the income and then accumulate and save up the cash inflow, because based on the earlier example I gave you, you could have an income, but you don't have the cash because you still receive it next month, right? At the same time, that's why for me, the dam represents the water that's being released in a controlled manner. And this is what we are saying when you talk about expenses, you need to manage your expenses. So there's a controlled way, and hopefully it's the critical element of we have collected enough to pay for the expenses. So it could be at times you will first delay the possibility of delaying expenses within a given month, just to make sure you have enough of your cash inflow. Because in dry season, when there's not enough rains, when the dam, there's no water, this is the critical parts. You do not want to reach this point where there's a parched land and you still have to release water. You still have to pay for your employment costs and utilities, all right? This is the critical element. That's why the first perspective of the dam, of trying to store as much water, is very, very important, because we have obligations to our employees. We could not tell them, oh, we did not collect the payment for this tuition. There's no salary for this pay period, right? You could not say, we can't pay the electricity bills. So you want to avoid a situation where it's parched land, barren land, that you fail to accumulate enough water. And that's why please keep in mind the visual imagery of a dam. Generate as much cash savings and then have a control points in terms of releasing your water, in terms of your expenses. Avoid reaching this stage. And I've seen certain schools reach this stage and they are at a critical level. Some might opt just to consider what's closing the school. So, and then that defeats the very purpose of why we have the Catholic school. So please, I want to work with you. Let's work together. Let's avoid reaching this point in time of your school operations.
Deacon, we have a question from Chris.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
His question is there a fund that schools can borrow from due to loss of income from COVID and students leaving? Who can help us raise funds?
Well, it is important that there's the diocese, but you see, the whole perspective is that we all should have planned for COVID. Number two, we should have projected the income that we are receiving in order for us to manage the expenses. And if you foresee that there's going to be a reduction of your income, then you may have to make a decision regarding your expenses. I mean, I help a school where, thank God, the church have some savings that was able to advance money to the school to meet payroll. Remember, within the structure of our diocese, the school is under the responsibility of the church. So I guess your first line of source of funds will be the church, but then you will have to look at the church income because they also have been affected by what? Limited in-person people attending in person in our liturgical services, right? There were occasions of the PPP1 and PPP2 that has helped schools. So did that generate savings for the school? Because PPP1 is money that we borrowed from the governments that were used for payroll. That means the school should have saved this money that would have been used for payroll. So those are some of those things that you have to really to look into. Okay. Any other questions, Celeste? I hope I satisfied. If there's any other additional clarifications, feel free.
No questions at this time.
Hopefully it's helpful. Let's move on. Okay. Parents enroll their daughter in the school. The tuition is 9,000, and the daughter is entitled to a financial aid of 1,000 from AEF. Right. So because it is money coming in, we know it is income. But the question is there an income? And then the cash flow. So in terms of recognizing the income, the total tuition is 9,000. 1,000 is coming as financial aid. Insofar as the books, insofar as your recognition of income, it would still be 9,000, right? Because net tuition is 8,000, financial aid 1,000. So we are reporting that financial aid. The income that is to be reported is still at 9,000. In terms of cash inflow, so you expect to collect from the parents 8,000 and from AEF 1,000. So you still will have an income of 9,000 and a cash of 9,000. However, similar to that experience of that credit card purchase, the critical element is time. Because while I may have a 9,000 income, that 9,000 may not translate as cash because parents decide to pay for 10 months, right? So you're saying you have an income, but the cash inflow now is staggered throughout 10 months. Or you can report a financial aid income in July when you close the year and then recognize all the financial aid. So in July 1st or August 1st, you report financial aid income, $1,000. But is that cash? Not yet. It will become cash when you receive the money from AEF, which normally comes October, late September, October. So you have an income reported in August, but it becomes cash next month. Another situation normally happens at the school. Parents enroll their daughter, tuition 9,000, and the school decided, okay, there's a 30% tuition discount. So how much do we recognize as income and what happens to cash? So obviously, because it is a discount, so there's a tuition of 9,000, there's a discount that is given. So income that will be reported in your scoreboard will be 6,300. And what happens to cash? Then you expect the parents to pay 6,300, right? And then again, the critical element of time, and now the critical element of cash is you're receiving less because there was a discount that you provided as part of the encouragement for students to enroll. But if the 6,300 was a parent's payment plan, but the second question is then where will you get this? Where will the school get the cash? The difference of 2,700 offset the discount. Okay? And that's why there must be a strategic decision you all have to make regarding tuition discount, because really discount means you are eating up, reducing your cash, your savings. And therefore, the next item that you will have to consider always, where do we now get the support, the cash to cover for the discount? That's why you might have an in-house scholarship fund, and that's one of the things that I have been working in some schools. Let's build up your in-house scholarship fund so that we could use this in-house scholarship fund to cover for the discounts that you are providing. So it's not just all donations and fundraisings that go into the general operation. Sometimes I tell the school, let's set aside these funds. Then you have the cash to cover for the discounts that you are providing. So that really helps once you are able to start building up an in-house cash fund for the scholarship to cover for the discounts that you are providing. Okay, I'll stop at that. Questions? Thoughts?
None at this time.
Okay, good. So now the interplay of income and expenses within the context of the critical element of time, then we've realized, okay, we are reporting our financial statements for 1 year. That covers the fiscal year July to June. So there'll be the reporting of the income and expenses. However, tuition income is reported within the given school year. Therefore, the tuition income is reported from August to May. It matches the school year. But it could happen in July. You'll have people giving you donations. So those will be recognized as income, right? But at the same time, even if it's July and your school haven't started, some of you, remember, we are obligated to pay the teachers for 12 months. While this is the context of time within income and expenses, the other element is cash. And here is the critical part. Generally, parents would pay either in advance or would stay, and most would just be on a 10-month payment period, which is August to May. So you have a situation where your cash that you're receiving is from August to May, but your expenses is from July to June. You might say, oh, there are parents who pay us in full in August or in July, they'll pay us in full. Great. Yes. But the critical question would be, you need to save up those cash because you still will meet obligations. You need to stretch that money that you now have with you because we have an obligation in terms of the payroll of our teachers, July and June when there's no school. Payment of electricity, utilities, right? Even if there's no school, there's still power, there's still water, there's still expenses that you incur. And so this is the critical elements. It's not just looking at the income expenses, but really cash. The more emphasis that we have in terms of cash management, decisions that you are making, the better is the situation in terms of the thriving, in terms of the sustainability of the school. Because at the end of the day, you might report an income, but you do not have cash. You might report a loss, that means expense is higher than income, but probably you have the cash because there could be non-cash expenses built into your income statements. So this is the critical element that I keep mentioning to the principals and to administrators. Always look at your cash, because that's what we need to pay the salaries, to pay what the power company, right? I wish we could, unless the school can pay what their employees with sacks of rice and poi and and canned goods, which we cannot. It has to be cash. So please, this is an important element. So I'd like to pause and just see if there are questions, clarifications, because after this, we will now go to a real financial statement of school. How has it been so far?
No questions at this time.
Okay, hopefully you're learning, or I'm going too fast. If I'm using terminologies that's difficult, please let me know. It's something new, but hopefully this gives you the perspective, really the strategic decisions that you are making eventually are kept in a scorecard or a scoreboard, right? And it's just the interplay of those four elements: income, expenses, cash in, cash out. So we now go to a real live situation, a real finances of the school. And this is where normally we would always say, as you may be hearing of the term profit, loss, break even. When you say it is a loss, well, in our terminology as nonprofit, we say it's a deficit. It's simply expenses is greater than income. When it is profits, then obviously income is greater than expenses. If it is break even, then it's about total income equals total expenses. One of the things that I'm helping some of the schools is, while we are doing a budget that looks at the total income and total expenses, I also am trying to emphasize we may need to reduce certain components of the budget so that the school is really setting a cash income budget. It is really matching your total income that becomes cash with your expenses that becomes cash out. Because in your budget, you have total income, total expenses, but you could have expenses that do not take cash. You could have income that did not bring in the cash. So I would always tell the principal, okay, this is your total budget, total income, total expenses. We're showing a loss or a profit, but let's adjust certain items because we need to see if there's anything that I want to emphasize here. I guess for most principals and leaders at the school, let's make a cash break-even budget for the school. That means the total cash, total income that becomes cash matches total expenses that would entail cash outlay at the minimum. Therefore, any other components that you do would provide savings, cash savings that will help sustain the school for the future. And the second element that's also very important has to do not just in terms of looking at the cash income, cash expenses. Savings is what is important because we have to plan for improvements, improvements in technology, upgrading the curriculum, or the sending our teachers to an continuing education program, right? So those cash savings is very, very important for the continued sustainability of the school. So here is a picture of a real financial statement of a school, which reported 1.9 million income and 1.6 million expenses. Therefore, they made total changes is about 250,000. And I'm sure you all are familiar with this financial statements, right? So I'd like to pause for now in case are there questions that you have, because this is what is reported to you. This is the statement of activities because it has the income and expenses. So if there are no questions regarding terminologies that you encounter here in the regular financial statements, can I move on?
No questions in the chat box.
Okay, well, you all are very good. I hope I'm helping you. I'm giving you additional learnings, something that would help you. Okay, so for purposes of analysis, really, we look at total income and total expenses. The interplay of income expenses, we could not touch for analysis the restricted assets, restricted donations of 43,000, right? Because that is given, and we could not touch that because it is clearly designated for a particular purpose. Yes, it is income. Yes, there might have received cash, but then you cannot touch this for your operations because it is restricted, designated for a special purpose. Therefore, we are trying to analyze the total income, total expenses. Of the 1.9 million income, we will have to remove, for purposes of understanding the school budget, school operations, the 137,000, because what was reported as 137,000 income has to do with an investment, the gain that the school had on their investment. So this is reported as an income. So it could be you have funds with AEF, or you've made those investments, or well, AEF, or if your school is allowed to do outside investments, you always would, at the end of the year, be reporting what's the status of your income, of your investments, was it a gain or loss. But this has nothing to do with the school operations, because this reported income has to do with how the stock markets have performed. It has nothing to do with the school. Secondly, it did not convert into cash, because the only way this can be converted to cash is when you sell your investments, right? When you redeem them. So for now, there's the investment, but for purposes, we have to remove this analysis.
Deacon, we have a question.
Yes.
Question from Philip. How does a school budget for future inflation?
And that's the reason what we do for budgeting, right, is look at the different line items of the expenses. And normally the diocese will provide budgetary assumptions. So the diocese will tell us, okay, for salary expenses, this much. For your medical insurance coverage, we anticipate, because they will negotiate with the medical healthcare providers, service providers, in terms of what the insurance rate will be. So the starting point is, number one, the diocese guidelines of the budget assumptions. And then the second, if you project, you look at not just in terms of inflation, you also have to look at, okay, are there special programs, emphasis that the school would have? So a school may decide to, okay, beginning next school year, let's put money in terms of our advertising and marketing to generate more awareness. So that is a strategic decision. You want to put certain emphasis of just that community outreach. Therefore, you're making an adjustment for your marketing. So all your budgets numbers really is dependent on, number one, the strategic plan that the school, the direction, the emphasis they would want to have. Number three, insofar as assumptions, the diocese provides those guidelines. Thank you for your questions. Now going back, so really, the reported income that has to do with the operations of the school is 1.8. And if we now try to visualize, what we are seeing is that of the total income, 79% is coming from your tuition and fees. 12% for your regular income, the cafeteria, the school, after school care, and the other school programs, then the fundraising that you did. Okay. And then you have this unusual, the large donations, ongoing support that was given to the school. These are expenses. And normally, if I look at this, we could all assume these are all cash expenses, because two examples of non-cash expense would be depreciation and bad debts. Okay, so there's a question I'm able to see in the chat. What's the healthy amount of money to budget for marketing? So that again will have to depend on the total program that you will have. I could not tell you what the amount would be, because that entails the total program that the school would want to have. Are they just utilizing what materials, advertisements? Would they employ other marketing services like other platforms? So marketing really is something that's, you have to look at your marketing plans or somebody providing a real picture of your marketing activity. Each school is different. There are schools who would put just simply 5,000 and manage that. Then they'll just look at what advertisement in the local news or certain magazines. There could be others who would have a greater marketing plan, and that's supported by the budget that they would set. So really, everything should be dependent on the program that you will have. So there's unfortunately no hard and fast rules. Hopefully that satisfies you, Yvette. So now when we look at expenses, right, we could see 70%, 77% is for employment costs. Then the rest will be professional services. The next big ticket item would be your supplies, which is 8%. If you now combine this, what can you draw from this scorecard? What interpretations will you have? We are seeing that out of our total cash inflow, 79% is coming from our tuition and fees. Yet, out of that 79%, you are practically using your tuition to pay for your salaries, because you are having 77% salaries, employment costs. Remember, employment costs is not just the salary component. It includes, okay, number one, obviously the salaries of all of your staff, but it also includes the employer taxes, the medical insurance coverage, the pension plan, the sharing of the 401k. All of those are related. And that's why employment, setting the budget for employment is very, very critical, because it's not just the salaries. It is the combination of the salaries, employer taxes, because as employer, there's a share by the school to the FICA and Social Security of each of the employees. There's a matching program. Second would be the health insurance coverage that you provide to your employees. Those are part of employment costs, as well as the 401k. If there's a program by the school, then that's also part of their employment costs. And so what we are seeing is practically in a school operations, well, it's talking about 1.9, 1.8 million, we could say that tuition pays for the employment costs. So where will the school get payment for the electricity, the power, the cafeteria's provider, the other expenses, right? And so that is the critical part. And sometimes I have to work with schools and tell them, can we prepare a budget where the total income total tuition income, I mean, we only set 75% to meet employment costs so that tuition can still pay for the other expenses. Because if your tuition is practically the same as your employment costs, then easily we could say there's a big burden now in terms of fundraising and other school programs, because there are still these huge expenses of insurance and developments and repairs, maintenance, right? Utilities. So you really have to, and the bigger part, I mean, part of a good manager, and if you're familiar with Pareto principle, if you could manage the 80% of your expenses and the 80%, if you put 20% of your time managing the 80%, then you're being an effective manager. And then the complications would come in because I can report tuition income, but did that convert into cash? Because I may have a tuition income of so much, but it could be because of delinquencies, parents have not paid us on time, then we do not have the cash. While we reported an income, then there is no cash inflow. And the pressure now is, then I have to release water, just like the dam, because I have to pay employment costs. There's the salary that we will all have to meet for electricity bills. So those are the critical components, the interplay and the focus that you all should have. So really, the starting point is having a more realistic budget, and then making sure you are clear what is the cash income goal that you have, pursuing your income to become cash. Because you could have somebody making a donation of 100,000, but will tell you, I'll make this donation next year, or here is 10,000 and the rest will come 10,000 every year. So I could only recognize 10,000 in relation to this given year as income, not the total 100. So you could have income and not cash, and that is because of delinquencies. On the other hand, the pressure now of expenses, you have to pay, there has to be a cash out, a money out to pay for your operational expenses. I think I've given you, that's the perspective that I have shared. Really, it's equipping you, making you understand the critical components, the critical element of time, which means, is there a way for me to have the income or a project where eventually I will have cash that will sustain me, because I know I will have to pay. There's going to be, I have to release water. I have to pay for these expenses. I need to control it. But my strategy now is to accumulate as much cash inflow to generate the savings. And the savings that we have every year is very important for the sustainability of the school. So I guess I want to close at this. It gives you about 10 minutes. Let's learn from one another. Hopefully this has triggered a mindset for you how to eventually strategically manage the finances, the financial health of the school, looking at the reports generated by your business manager. If you need, understand those, but first and foremost, it is a decision you all have made, right? So that's my presentation. I still have 10 minutes and I want to open it up for questions and answers. And I may not have the answer right now, but I'll try to provide you the perspective as much as I can.
At this time, each of you are able to unmute if you'd like to ask Deacon Raffy a question. Any I wonders?
I hope it's not way over your head. At the same time, I hope something that you could take with you and help you be a more effective leader. Yes, Bridget. Oh, yeah, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Bridget, I can't hear you. Bridget, your
Hi, Bridget.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you. It said the host needed to unmute me. I could not unmute it. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Thank you. Something we used this for the earlier presentation for the whole faculty, so I thought maybe someone changed my settings. My question, and I apologize, it wasn't on here for all of it, so you may have already addressed this, but my question has to do with, we receive title money, Title I, Title IV, Title II money. So this is funding appropriated to the school to help improve, the math and reading scores or teacher professional development in that. So sometimes when I look at my budget, I've reduced the amount that I spend on teacher development because I'll use it through the title funds that I receive instead. So I always feel that looks kind of bad, like maybe I'm not giving enough teacher development, whereas I am getting it from another source. But my question is, where do you report those, or you don't? Because I've been told that you don't have to put that anywhere in your financials. And so I keep all the, paperwork, but I don't know how to legally show like what we receive in a financial report.
Yeah, because the critical element there is, did the school receive money for this? And normally it's not, right? Because it's being paid for by DOE and everything. So it will not appear in your financial statements. You're doing it right in terms of keeping track of all of those, because what you're saying now, I'm able to provide for the ongoing learning for my teachers without using cash of the school.
Right.
Yes. It is not reported because there's no money coming in into your school. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Because it would be difficult for you to recognize that as an expense, right, without the corresponding income, because it would show a negative amount. However, for me, I believe if it is significant in amounts, you may decide to make certain line items in your expense account to include those,
Okay.
right? But then there must be a clear explanation.
Okay, so even now with the Ian's funding that we're receiving from the government, most of those things that are we paid for and are reimbursed, or that the government or the state, the DOE buys it for us.
Yes.
Yeah, so
So when it is reimbursed, so obviously at the start of the year before setting the budget, you already would have known, right, how much INS grants you would have received and how much you would have been reimbursed. So like with the school that I work with, because we are receiving cash, then we have to report that as an income,
okay.
and it is a reimbursement for the expenses. So in fact, what I did with the school, we prepared a separate line item with INS to show the INS income and the INS expense. This is very important so that 2-3 years from now, right, when we look at the total expenses of the school, then we could say, oh, this one was funded by INS.
I see. Okay.
But you added it into your financial statement because you received money, you were reimbursed, right? But if
Right.
DOE paid for this laptop and everything,
So
yeah, so there's no,
you're only reporting the income that came into you for the, and
because you receive cash, because you receive an investment.
okay, got that. Thank you.
That's why income, expense, cash in, cash out.
All right, thank you.
Deacon, if I could ask a question, because I see we have some, a lot of great school leaders here. I wanted to know, first of all, the Augustine Foundation, when we book something that like we're planning on, but it's not necessarily income, it kind of is a bringing in, we just book it as a receivable. Is that what the schools do? So my question ties into what the Augustine Foundation does for the school. So we provide a list of students that are due to receive scholarships, and then we cut the check in the last business day of September. My question is twofold. Would it be easier for the schools to receive the checks earlier, or is it harder because some of their students that get scholarships drop off and don't? I mean, a lot of times this applies to more high schools, but they don't actually stay enrolled. So would it be easier for the principals to get the scholarship checks earlier rather than later? And when you book it, do you book it as a receivable, like that money you're expecting, or is it showing as income?
No, it is first reflected as a receivable. It's something that we will be collecting from AEF as financial aid. So if there's a specific line item, right, it is not a tuition receivable, but it's really something that we are expecting from AEF, right? Because remember, when the school generates the fax agreements, they already will indicate, okay, this family gets a credit for 1,000 coming from AEF. So when at the beginning of the school year, that is already being captured in terms of what we expect from AEF, from Kamehameha, Mary Samuel Castle Foundation. Yes.
Do you think it would be easier for the schools to get the checks earlier? Because that can be done.
We have some of the teachers who are here.
Bridget, Celeste.
They're in a better position.
Yeah. So a lot of times, like I said, we have a fairly, maybe 30 students don't show up for their scholarship. So we have to have like a certain enrollment, verified enrollment. But our schools back in the day when we were doing it in September, they weren't starting until August. Now a lot of our schools are starting in July or they're year round, or so. It's just want to make sure that we're respectful of what's best for the schools.
Since you're asking, and so this is Bridget.
Hi, Bridget.
Hey, Sue. I don't want to misquote how we book it, because I'd have to double check with my, my bookkeeper and stuff. But we feel that it's working the way it is. Of course, money early is always wonderful. So if that works out, but you are right. There are families that say they're coming and they start the year and it doesn't work out. And then, it's just like refunding money to you. I don't know if you want that, or, I think that makes it complicated. So
it does make it complicated, but there's also like, especially maybe we could divide the list where, your repeat students where, they have their enrollment contracts all signed. This is only really typically pertaining to new students. And with COVID, it kind of takes everything into crazy land because you never know. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we hear you and what your needs are, because I know that you've called us for Title I eligibility stuff. Mm-hmm. So we're working now with facts now. So maybe that's something that we can tie in with Tanya when she pulls the data, because if that's helping you, then that's a good thing. But
it helps with a lot of things, the free and reduce, or lower income, because it also helps you get E-rate to reduce your telecommunication. I mean, so that's why I use it. I mean, that's why I hate to be a pest, but it's extremely helpful to have that data from you.
Okay. All right.
This is Celeste. I'd like
Celeste.
Hi, happy Friday. I don't mean to throw Malia under the bus, but Malia, if you could share, would it make a difference for the school to receive the funding a little earlier, or is it fine the way it is?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Malia.
For us, I think for every school is different because everybody's financial need is different. But for for our school right now, it's fine the way it is.
Okay. Deacon, what we've tried to do is those that have scholarship funds and they're booked as assets held for others, we try to send that money out to them in August. So like, St. Teresa's, Our Lady of Good Counsel, and so on. And Mary Star of the Sea, that money coming to them in August, I know is helpful. So then that's different than that's money that it's theirs, but we just help administer it. So yeah, good conversation. I really appreciate this session, Deacon.
For me, my experience of schools, I think the first half of the year, they're still cash rich. So because it could be their parents who would pay in full at the beginning of the school year, right? Because there's an incentive for discounts or they're meeting their obligation. And sometimes, in fact, I would have to tell the principal, okay, don't be so positive that you start spending money. Keep those for savings, because the second half of the year, between January to June, that's where you still will have the bills, you still will have the enrollment, the salaries. But then now the delinquencies are slowly mushrooming and building up. And they're saying, okay, try to save as much as we can, because there's going to be this month of June where there's no income and we still have to pay the salaries. When we begin the new school year in July, there's still very few. And in reality, what we are saying is the school should be able to operate within that fiscal year. Many of the schools that I've seen, the down payments made in May or July or advanced tuition, they're using that as their salary as well, as part of the salary in June. And so that's not a good practice, really. And so it's really working with each of the schools, creating certain strategies of really pinpointing areas to start managing the expenses, right? So to have enough cash for those lean months.
Deacon, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
In regards to funds like AEF funds or Kamehameha funds that come into our school, I was curious about, should you be recording that into your donor database system? Because we get it, but it goes right to paying the tuition. I was just curious, like, should that be put into the donor database?
No.
Okay.
Because these are
We haven't been, but I was just curious about, should I be like creating some type of area in there for money that comes in for tuition from these Kamehameha and AEF?
No. Generally, they're not, yeah. No.
Ultimately, we're not a donor.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if I should be recording it like there, even though we get it and it goes right back out.
I know. Yeah, many people actually consider the AEF to be a diocesan office, but we're not. We're actually funded completely separately. I always say I look like a duck, walk like a duck, but we're not one. We partner with the diocese. Our sole purpose is to support Catholic schools. But yeah, so we're not considered to be a donor, but we're just like a separate foundation. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We love your thank you notes anyway, but and we pass
Thank
those
you.
on. We pass those on to our donors and everything. So I
Okay,
want to encourage our principals and schools to apply to our teacher curriculum development grant program as well. Holy Family and Mary Star of the Sea and St. Louis all had great funded programs this year. They partnered with each other. So if, say, St. John Vianney and St. Anthony's in Kailua or any other schools want to partner and share those resources, you get a big bang for your buck. So hopefully we'll see a lot of really creative things.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
As I end, again, I would like to encourage you, have a strategic understanding of your budget. Don't just go through the motions. Don't just go through, okay, income, expenses, but look at the holistic strategic view. If you need certain assistance, comments, send it to me. I could tell you areas to watch out for, but try to manage your tuition and your employment costs. A good business manager, a good leader, right, spends 20% managing the 80% of your income and expenses.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for your participation and attention. At this time, please return to the ACCE 2022 website to view our generous sponsors and talk with your fellow attendees on the discussion boards until the next session begins. And with that, thank you very much, Deacon Raffy, and everyone, happy Aloha Friday. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Celeste. Thanks, Deacon.